يرأس هذه الجلسة البروفيسور عاصم خوجة أستاذ الاقتصاد والسياسات العامة في جامعة هارفارد.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I spent along with my panelists all of yesterday in Mecca, so it's especially a pleasure to be here. But Jazakallah khair for the invitation to Dr. Saleh, Dr. Nazim, Al-Qura University. It's truly an honor to be here. It's even bigger honor to be here at your first Islamic Finance Conference. From what I'm seeing so far, alhamdulillah, it's going to be a great conference, and I'm thrilled to be the inaugurating panel of the conference. The first panelist is Professor Atif Mia. Professor Atif Mia is a faculty member at Princeton and one of the leading scholars of the financial crisis in the US. Atif, you can start coming up. Atif's main focus in the panel is going to be to start us with a very big picture perspective, to understand what are the implications of having risk sharing enter an economy from the macroeconomic aspects of the economy. Atif has a book along with our second speaker, Amir Sufi, called The House of Debt, and Atif will draw on some of the insights from that book. So Atif, why don't you start as I walk.
Thank you, Asim. Thank you all for coming. Let me just, Assalamu alaikum, start by saying it's a great privilege and honor to be here, the city of our beloved Prophet where he was born. I'm going to talk about risk sharing from the perspective of the macroeconomy. When we talk about financial instruments in general and specifically with respect to debt, one can either approach this question from a religious perspective in terms of what's allowed or not allowed, and I'm sure people will talk about that at different level. We can also think about that question from a fairness or an equity perspective. Is it fair that a person who is borrowing has to pay that much interest rate regardless of what happens? So there's a fairness element to it. I'm not going to talk about either of those two dimensions. What I'm going to focus on is the macroeconomic dimension of this question, which is when two people engage in a financial contract and one person, let's say I'm the borrower and I'm borrowing from Asim sitting to my right, if we agree on a contract that says if I borrow $100, I have to pay 110 back to Asim after the stipulated period of time. So 10% is the interest rate. If both of us voluntarily enter into this agreement, I am not being forced into this contract. We are willingly entering into this contract. Why should we worry about this contract from a macro perspective, or perhaps from a broader social perspective? That's the question I want to think about. And the basic idea that I want to convey is, it comes partly from the research that Amir Sufi and I have done over the years. The problem in such a contract from a macroeconomic perspective is that any given economy has natural cycles. For example, if it's an agrarian economy, sometimes it's raining and there's no issue, and sometimes you have a drought and all of a sudden now this economy is feeling a crunch. It goes into a sort of a recessionary cycle. These cycles are natural. To some extent we understand them, but to a large extent we don't understand what drives the fundamentals of these cycles. So let's take these kind of cycles as given and ask ourselves the following question. If in an economy there are many people like myself and Asim, borrowers like myself and lenders like Asim, if there are many multitudes, millions of us, and that kind of an economy goes into this cycle, think about what's going to happen given the nature of the contract that Asim and I have written. What's going to happen when this economy goes into a downward cycle? A natural consequence of that is going to be that whoever is the borrowing class, so again in this example it's people like myself, we are going to be much harder hit in terms of bearing the negative consequences of that downward cycle. That's just the definition of debt, because the borrower keeps all of the risk. That's the key element, that's the key definition of what debt is. And so in the event of a downturn, it's the borrowers who get disproportionately squeezed. And one might say, what's wrong with that? After all, I voluntarily went into the contract with Asim, knowing fully well that if the economy goes into a downturn, I am the one bearing the larger responsibility. And again, the point is not that this is wrong from a fairness perspective. The point is that when all of the borrowers bear this crunch, it's their net worth that disproportionately gets hit, and as a consequence of that, it's the entire economy that gets hurt. So let me get into that argument a little bit more. The reason that happens is that borrowers are by definition different. The two main ways of thinking about why someone borrows. One is that I'm borrowing from Asim because I'm in need to spend that money. In economic terms, we call those people with high marginal propensity to spend. Those are people that typically spend a much larger share of income or cash flows that they receive. The same logic that they have high marginal propensity to spend implies that when I get squeezed in a downturn, I'm going to cut back my spending a lot more. I'm going to react a lot more to this negative macroeconomic shock compared to what would have been the case if Asim were subjected to the same shock. But since he's not subjected to the same shock, because remember, I am the one borrowing from him, so my net worth is squeezed a lot more than Asim's, I am going to respond a lot more to that shock, and as a result, the whole economy is going to face the consequences of all of people like myself who borrowed from the lending class in this economy, and the whole economy will tend to be depressed to a much larger degree. This is the key point. The whole economy will be depressed to a much larger degree than would have been the case if we had a different kind of a financial contract. For example, a more risk-sharing contract, a more equity-like contract. Let me give you one more example. This is the example where I was borrowing from Asim for spending, for consumption reason. The alternative could be that I borrowed from Asim for productive reasons, that I'm the entrepreneur, I'm the businessman. Even then the same logic goes through because by definition, since I am the businessman and I'm borrowing, I am the one who knows how to use capital productively and efficiently. And if I am bearing the disproportionate burden of the downturn in the economy, my productive capacity is going to be constrained. But in some important ways, I am the productive engine of the economy, and people like myself, remember, this is happening collectively. And so once again, if the productive class is squeezed because of the downturn, people who have excess wealth, because that's why they were lending, in this example again, it's Asim, That's why they were lending in the first place. They don't have as good a use of the capital that they now have more of as a share of the economy. And consequently, the economy again suffers a lot more than would have been the case if Asim and I were somehow able to write a contract that had better risk-sharing consequences. Okay? So this is conceptually this is the key point. The net worth is squeezed a lot more for the borrowing class, which makes everyone worse off. It's not just about the borrowers, it makes everyone worse off. And that's a problem with not having sufficient risk sharing in the financial contract. Now, if we agree with this logic, I want to move to the next question, which is, if risk sharing is so good for the macroeconomy, why do we not see that in practice? Why do we see debt as the predominant financial contract in the economy? One reason for that might be historical or behavioral, but let me give you another very important reason, which is
سلوكيات المستهلكين وإن ربما يرتبط بأن هذه الآثار المتعلقة بالاقتصاد الكلي التي تحدثت عنها معنية بأن ذلك مرتبط بأن القرارات الشخصية التي اتخذتها وعاصم وربما لا نأخذ في الاعتبار بأن هنالك عقد يجب أن نبرمه أم لا. هذه هي الطريقة التقليدية في الاقتصاد أن هنالك أشياء محددة فإن التدخين للسجائر فإن ذلك يؤثر على صحة الآخرين وربما لا أعبأ لأن هذه خارجية وإننا حينما نبرم هذه العقود المالية التي ترتبط بإحصائيات محددة فإن ذلك يرتبط بهذه الآثار الخاصة بالاقتصاد ولا نأخذ ذلك في الاعتبار بشأن العقد الذي يتعثر بكافة هذه الرول المختلفة. لهذا فإننا يجب أن نفكر في الوكالات الخارجية التي تلعب دورا ما وبالتالي فإنها إن أجبرت اللاعبين الفرديين لكي يأخذوا في الاعتبار هذه المؤثرات المختلفة ذلك يمكن أن يتم عبر حوافز في سياق محددة على المستوى الضريبي أو على مستوى العقود المبرمة. لسوء الحظ فإننا بحثنا في الطريقة الحالية من النظم الضريبية القائمة فإن الوضع معكوس من زاوية الاقتصاد الكلي. لهذا فإن النظم الخاصة برأس المال التي كتبت اليوم تحفز على المزيد من المديونية مقارنة بتحفيز تحمل الحقوق بطريقة يتقاسم فيها المالكين والمساهمين هذه المخاطر. لهذا إن قمنا بتحديد هذه المؤثرات المختلفة ما بين العناصر والوكلاء الفرديين فإن ذلك يجب أن يأخذ في الاعتبار. هنالك قضايا أخرى معنية بالابتكار في القطاع المالي وإنني متأكد بأن المتحدثين الآخرين سيتصدون لذلك. فإن التكنولوجيا تلعب دورا كبيرا في تقسيم هذه المخاطر بين مختلف أصحاب المصلحة وهو شيء إنني متأكد سيتم الحديث بشأنه لاحقا. إننا حينما نتحدث عن العقود المالية فإن هذه العقود المالية آثارها ليست فقط معنية بالمتعاقدين بل إن الآثار ترتبط بآثار كلية واجتماعية ويجب أن نأخذ في الاعتبار ذلك حينما نصيغ اللوائح والنظم.
Thank you, Asif.